They threw women into freezing rivers, and if they floated, they were burned alive. Europe's witch trials skilled tens of thousands. But the ones who lived, they faced something worse than death. How did fear and superstition give birth to torture? Machines made just for women? Let's uncover 20 of the most disturbing torture tactics ever used, starting music with the ones history tried to forget. 20. Mass wartime rape was a military strategy, not a side effect. In every major modern conflict, armies didn't just kill, they used women's bodies as battlegrounds. They weren't caught in the crossfire, they were the target. Take the Rwanda genocide in 1994. In just 100 days, over 250,000 women were raped, many infected with HIV deliberately by militia groups. These weren't spontaneous assaults. They were planned acts of terror approved by command to permanently destroy Tutsi bloodlines and communities. These same tactics were used in Bosnia, where an estimated 50,000 women were raped during the Yugoslav wars. These assaults happened in rape camps where women were held for months and systematically violated by soldiers, police, even civilians. This kind of sexual violence was codified genocide, not only to torture, but to impregnate women with enemy bloodlines, force shame on families, and make returning home impossible. What's worse, many perpetrators were never prosecuted. Reports estimate conflict-related sexual violence occurs in 70% of armed conflicts, and in many regions today, music from South Sudan to Myanmar, it's still happening. A 2019 report named it a strategic weapon still in active use. These women are often invisible in post-war narratives, and still governments pretend it's too complex to address. It's not. It's war policy, just not in writing. Next, a torture that's still legal in over 90 countries. Let's move to number 19. Genital mutilation isn't tradition. It's institutionalized torture. Forget the euphemisms. What's often called female. Genital cutting isn't cultural ritual. It's state-sanctioned violence. And then numbers are horrifying. Over 200 million women alive today have undergone some form of female genital mutilation, FGM. The procedure often involves cutting off the clitoris, labia, and even stitching the vagina shut without anesthesia using razors, glass, or rusty knives. The girl is held down by relatives, sometimes even her own mother, in a scene resembling more an execution than a rite of passage. The psychological music damage lifelong physical effects, chronic infections, painful sex, lifelong trauma, and childbirth complications that music kill both mother and child. In Somalia and parts of Sudan, the most extreme type, Type 3 FGM, is done to 90% of women. This involves full inflation, removing external genitals and sealing the vagina, leaving a pinhole for urine. This isn't some ancient relic. It still happens daily. Even in Europe and North America, there are thousands of illegal underground FGM cases annually, especially in immigrant communities where girls are flown abroad for vacation cutting. And here's the twisted part. Many governments refuse to criminalize it outright because of cultural sensitivity. But no culture should be a shield for torture. If that doesn't shake your belief in modern human rights, what comes next might. Here comes number 18. Breast ripping was the church's favorite torture tool for women. You've heard of burning witches, but fewer people know what happened before the fire. They called it justice. It looked more like medieval sadism. Enter the breast ripper, an iron device shaped like claws, heated until red hot, then used to literally tear breasts off the accused. This method was used throughout medieval Europe, particularly during the Inquisition and witch trials, to punish women accused of adultery, heresy, blasphemy, or simply owning property someone wanted. In Germany, breast mutilation was codified punishment for women who killed husbands or committed sexual crimes. France, Spain, Italy, the practice was widely used and often combined with public spectacle. Some were left alive, their chests torn open to remind other women. And if that sounds far off, in 1994, a report from Sudan documented rebel forces using heated metal skewers to disfigure women's breasts during interrogation. This was never just about pain. It was about destroying music femininity, punishing sexuality, and erasing female identity altogether. That's the psychological layer no one teaches in school. The breast ripper wasn't the only tool of female eraser. Some went for the face. Next is number 17. Nose cutting wasn't a warning. It was a life sentence. Imagine being dragged into the street, held down, and having your nose hacked off. No trial, no appeal, just judgment and mutilation. That was real life in large parts of Asia and the Middle East. From ancient Persia to 19th century India, nose cutting was used as a punishment for women accused of adultery, disobedience, or running away from abusive husbands. It was about marking shame on the body, a permanent sentence you wore on your face. Afghanistan revived global attention to this in 2010 when Time magazine featured Aisha Muhammadzi, an 18-year-old girl whose husband and in-laws cut off her nose and ears after she tried to escape forced marriage. Her image shocked the West, but in many regions, this was routine. Under Taliban rule, courts often allow or music ignore these punishments, framing them as family matters. Women mutilated this way are usually abandoned, isolated, or pushed into prostitution just to survive. Even in the Ottoman Empire, royal women caught in palace plots often had noses sliced off before being exiled. It's a long-standing system of physical branding, and if the face didn't do it, they'd go even deeper into the body. Let's move to number 16. Rat torture made rodents dig through living flesh. Sounds like a horror movie, right? A rat in a cage strapped to your stomach with fire applied to the cage until the rat starts digging. Only this wasn't fiction. It was used in multiple regimes, including recent history. Known as rat torture, this method dates back at least to the 16th century Europe, but gained brutal popularity under dictatorships in South America, particularly under Pinochet's Chile and Argentina's Dirty War. One survivor, detained in a secret Argentine black site, recalled hearing other women screaming about the rats before passing out from blood loss. Her testimony was later corroborated by multiple UN investigations. This torture wasn't about interrogation. It was about psychological music annihilation, turning women into animals in the eyes of their captors, destroying dignity before death. It's easy to call this medieval, but cases like this were documented as recently as the early 2000s in Burundi and Congo. Next up, torture through sleep deprivation. The quietest, cleanest, most efficient way to break a human mind. Here comes number 15. Sleep deprivation was the Inquisition's favorite mind-breaker. No blood, no bruises, no screaming, just hours turning. Today's, eyes wide open, begging for death. This was the Inquisition's cleanest torture and often the most effective. They called it watching, a humane method to extract confessions. Victims, especially women accused of witchcraft, were kept awake for 3 to 10 days straight, tied upright, or held under candlelight. If they started to fall asleep, they were prodded, slapped, or startled. Sometimes ropes were tied to their arms and ceiling beams, keeping them suspended upright for days. Sleep deprivation doesn't just cause exhaustion. After 48 hours, paranoia sets in. At 72 hours, hallucinations begin. Beyond 4 days, the brain starts collapsing. Language breaks down. Memory goes. Emotional regulation fails. A full confession can follow, and the accused will believe every word of it. During the Salem witch music trials, multiple girls endured this. One confessed to flying on a broom to the devil's house. Was she evil? No, she hadn't slept in 4 days. Modern regimes still use it. In Guantanamo Bay, detainees, including women, were subjected to 180-plus-hour sessions of sleep deprivation. In the music early 2000s, UN investigators called it a slow kill. The US called it enhanced interrogation. Next, when women were tortured under the illusion of science and medical exams. Next one is number 14. Shackling and stress positions wrecked women from the inside out. Imagine being tied in one position for 12 hours straight. Ankles twisted, arms above your head, no food, no movement. Now add shackles digging into your skin and start the clock. Stress position torture isn't new. It dates back to ancient China, but exploded in popularity in the 20th century detention centers. For women, it was usually paired with sexual threats and verbal degradation. The goal wasn't to get a confession fast. It was to collapse the body and mind over time. In El Salvador's civil war, women were hung by their wrists until their shoulders dislocated. In North Korean camps, female prisoners were bound into sitting coffin poses, knees to chest, head down, for weeks. Iria. Women in military prisons were handcuffed backwards to cell doors for hours while being whipped. In 2003, Music, a leaked CIA report, described a woman forced to kneel on concrete for 30 hours while shackled to a pipe overhead. Her legs turned blue. She stopped urinating. No charges were ever filed. What's often overlooked is the long-term damage. Women tortured this way often lose bladder control, suffer pelvic floor collapse, or develop permanent nerve injuries that make walking painful for life. Torture isn't always violent. Sometimes it's mathematical, hour by hour, joint by joint. Coming up, when revenge leaves a woman's face permanently erased, here comes number 13. Acid attacks are the ultimate public execution without a trial.
They don't kill you fast, that's the point. Acid attacks are meant to make women live with pain and shame forever. The chemical burns melt skin, muscle, eyelids, lips, even ears. Most victims go blind. Some lose noses. The survivors are often called ghosts in daylight because they're left so unrecognizable. Globally, over 1,500 acid attacks are reported each year, but activists say the real number is 3 times higher. Most victims are young women, and the motive is almost always dishonor or rejection, refusing marriage, resisting a bus, or simply dressing independently. In Bangladesh, one study found 70% of victims were under 18. In India, at least 250 acid attacks occur annually with conviction rates below 30%. In Pakistan, attackers often receive tribal protection or outright immunity. Here's how brutal the chemical itself is. Common acids used include sulfuric acid, drain cleaner, and hydrochloric acid. In many countries, you can buy them for under $2 at hardware stores. It's easier to get acid than painkillers, and there's a cruel irony. Many victims are forced to marry their attackers under family or court pressure to restore honor. Next, when silence was enforced with a metal muzzle jammed down the music throat. Let's move to number 12. Scold's bridles didn't just silence women, they mutilated them. Forget Thaida, that talkative women were just told to be quiet. They were gagged with iron masks until they bled. This Scold's bridle was medieval patriarchy with teeth, literally, used widely in Scotland, England, and Germany from the 16th to 18th centuries. These were metal helmets locked onto women's heads. Inside, a metal spike pressed into the tongue, sometimes puncturing it with every movement. The bridle didn't just silence, it caused infection, speech damage, and immense public humiliation. Women targeted included nagging wives, those who challenged clergy, gossiped, or accused powerful men of abuse. In short, the bridle was for any woman who refused to shut up. They were often marched through towns or chained in public places. Onlookers were encouraged to mock, spit, or throw a waste. Some bridles even had bells attached so everyone would hear them coming. One recorded case in Dundee 1653 had a woman wear the bridle for 3 days straight for disobedient behavior. She couldn't eat. Her tongue turned black from blood loss. She survived, but her voice never returned. This wasn't punishment. It was torture disguised as moral correction. And if silence music didn't break them, loneliness did. The next one is number 11. Solitary. Confinement didn't just lock women up. It unmade them. There are worse things than screaming. One of them is hearing nothing at all. That's solitary confinement. And for women, it often meant complete assert. No clocks, no mirrors, no sound. In some black sites, not even. Female prisoners were kept in cells no bigger than closets, often naked, surrounded by white walls with nowhere to track time. It's called sensory deprivation. And it doesn't take long before the brain starts to disassemble itself. In the US, over 5,000 women are in solitary at any given time, many for non-violent offenses. In Iran, political prisoners like Nazarene Sotoudeh were kept in solitary for over 100 days. She described hearing phantom voices and losing memory of her children's faces. One 2016 UN report called solitary a form of psychological torture, especially when music used on women who are more likely to self-harm. In one study, women in solitary were 6 times more likely to attempt suicide than those in general population. but prison systems argue it's for safety or order. Translation: it's easier to disappear a loud woman when no one can hear her scream. The next chapter, stripping away more than freedom, stripping away clothes, names, and humanity in public. Let's move to number 10. Public stripping and parading wasn't humiliation. It was weaponized dehumanization. Strip a woman naked in front of a crowd and you strip her of more than clothes. You rip away dignity, safety, and identity throughout history. That was the entire point. This method didn't require chains or blood. It relied on public approval. From ancient Rome to Nazi Germany, occupying forces and local regimes forced women to march naked through the streets. These weren't random incidents. They were planned events meant to humiliate, discredit, and dehumanize. In France, after World War II, women accused of horizontal collaboration with German soldiers were stripped, shaved, bald, painted with swastikas, and marched through towns. Over 20,000 French women faced this exact punishment. Not a single man did. During the partition of India in 1947, entire groups of Hindu and Muslim women were abducted by mobs, stripped, raped, and paraded through enemy villages as trophies of victory. These acts weren't chaotic. They were a deliberate psychological warfare. Some women were photographed, hung in effigy, or forced to dance nude for soldiers before being killed. In the Bosnian War, public sexual humiliation was part of ethnic cleansing. Records describe women being forced to perform sex acts in front of families or townspeople under gunpoint, specifically chosen to destroy social bonds. This isn't just about nudity or morality, it's torture through forced exposure, a method still used in prisons, protests, and conflict zones. Study. Next, we go into a form of so-called evidence gathering that disguised itself as medicine. It was just invasive abuse. Here comes number 9. Witch pricking used medical theater to justify sexual violence. Imagine a courtroom where guilt was measured by how many times you could be stabbed without bleeding. That's what passed for proof in Europe's witch hunts. And women's bodies were battlefield from the 1500s to the 1700s. Witch prickers were hereditary to find devil's marks on women's bodies. These could be birthmarks, moles, scars, anything that didn't bleed or feel pain when stabbed with a long needle. The accused were often stripped completely naked, examined by male prickers in public, and stabbed across their bodies, including breasts, thighs, and genitals. The worst part, many of the needles were retractable. The prick disappeared into the handle, making the woman super resistant. A Scottish witch pricker named John Kincaid Ways supposed using a fake blade after helping send dozens of women to execution. In Germany, a woman named Anna Goldie was accused of bewitching a child and was subjected to pricking, sleeplessness, and forced confessions. She was executed in 1782, a century after most witch trials ended. In truth, this wasn't about demons or magic. It was state-sanctioned sexualized torture dressed as legal process. The authorities rarely pricked men. Women were considered more susceptible to the devil, which really meant more susceptible to being violated with impunity. Now, imagine the state going one step further, not just invading the body, but ending what was growing in sight. Next one, number 8. Forced abortion made women's wombs a battlefield of control. This isn't just about abortion. It's about who controls reproduction and what happens when that control becomes a weapon. Governments, armies, and intelligence services have all forced women to abort pregnancies they didn't choose to end. Whether through beatings, drugs, surgery, or deception, the goal is the same: eliminate a fetus for ideological, racial, or disciplinary reasons. In Nazi Germany, pregnant women in concentration camps were injected or beaten until miscarriages occurred, unless the baby was racially valuable. In communist Romania, forced abortions were banned, so women were routinely monitored and forced to carry pregnancies. But in places like North Korea or China's one-child policy, it flipped. Abortion was forced to maintain population control. In Xinjiang, China, leaked documents revealed mass forced abortions and sterilizations of Uyghur Muslim women. Witnesses described guards dragging pregnant women from homes, injecting them in vans, and returning them unconscious, no longer pregnant. The numbers suggest thousands of pregnancies were forced. In Argentina's dirty war, pregnant political prisoners were allowed to give birth. only to have their babies taken and adopted by military families and the mothers executed afterward. The regime preserved the baby, erased music, the woman, and healthcare, its reproductive warfare, and it leads us straight to their next tactic. When entire bloodlines were erased permanently. Let's move to number 7. Sterilization programs didn't target health, they targeted lineage. When a woman is sterilized without consent, it's not medical, it's genetic erasure. And it happened for decades. In some places, it's still happening. In the 20th century, eugenics programs swept across the West. The idea was simple: stop undesirables music from reproducing. Who were they? Poor women, K-old women, black, brown, and indigenous women. The people seen as breeding problems. In the United States, over 60,000 women were forcibly sterilized between the 1920s and 1970s. North Carolina sterilized girls as young as 14, when a 17-year-old black girl was sterilized after a school nurse reported her as female. Her IQ was 89. In Peru, 1990s, under President Alberto Fujimori, over 200,000 indigenous women were sterilized under a campaign of reproductive health. Most weren't told the procedure was permanent. Some were rounded up from villages and YouTube. Policy and content disclaimer: this video is created strictly for educational, documentary, and historical analysis purposes. It presents historical practices within academic and contextual frameworks. No content is intended to glorify violence or promote harmful behavior. Any sensitive historical references are included solely to provide educational insight into past legal systems and societal structures. All materials are used in accordance with YouTube's policies on educational